Back to movementprofessional.com. So I want to do a video on using intermittent compression for wrist mobility, and we're going to break this down into 3 different steps. First, you can use just your other hand to create a compression and be pretty directed with it depending on where you're having pain or where you're having limitation, and you can get pretty good results for that. Makes it easier because then you don't have to go and get any other implement. You don't have to take the time to wrap your wrist up with any other object. So the first thing you would look at is just get your hand into the position of restriction. So most people will be limited with wrist extension, which would be bringing the forearm over the hand like so. But there's usually some distribution of pain that's either on the inside or outside, and that's different depending on the circumstance. So wherever you're feeling the discomfort, that's where you would first create the compression. So say I'm getting inside, like thumb side pain as I go into extension here. What I'm going to do is take my whole hand initially and just make a grip right on the wrist here. And then I'm going to try to keep that grip, keep that compression as I lean forward. And I just want to touch the onset of pain. So the whole idea of compression should be that you're able to go farther with the compression than without it. So if I don't have the compression, I might only be able to go to there before the discomfort, but if I add this gripping and this compression here right around the wrist, I should be able to go a bit farther before the onset of pain. Doesn't mean the pain's gone, but I'm able to just go farther pretty consistently, and it gives me a sense of support, which allows me to work into deeper ranges than I would without the compression there. So if I want to be a little bit more specific with that, and again I have this thumb side pain, I can actually just take my thumb and create a little bit of pressure directly into this thumb side wrist, which right here there's a bone called the scaphoid, which often becomes problematic and maybe even a little out of place when we have wrist issues. So if we push that in a little, again we're looking to see if we can get farther without pain. And that becomes your diagnostic assessment. So you don't have to know anatomy, you just have to create some pressure, see can I go a little farther without pain? If you can, you're probably in a good spot. Alright, so that would be just using the other hand to create compression to give you a little bit more wrist extension. The second thing would be to use a floss band, which is just this big rubber band-like thing that's broad, and we want to just wrap it around the wrist. So I usually like to put it around the wrist and around the hand, just so that you can get a little bit more security here. So first thing you have to do is just get a corner, and then you want to wrap it pretty tight. So I'll put one wrap around the hand and then the rest will be around the wrist. Now with the wrist, you can't go too tight, otherwise you're going to immediately cut off your circulation. So do like 1 or 2 wraps decently tight, and then you can just kind of let the rest of it out just right on the surface here without too much tension. Otherwise you're not going to be able to be here very long, and you want to be able to spend a few minutes, I'd say 2 minutes minimum, trying to mobilize here. So now I have this compression right around the wrist. And then I can also add the hand, and I'm going to go into the direction of my limitation. So again, if it's thumb side, I'd move them a little bit more towards the thumb and index finger, and then I can use my hand for some extra compression. If it's more pinky side, maybe I'm going to assess what it feels like to go towards pinky side. All right, so then there's also, with the hand on the ground, different places of pressure I could bias depending on what I'm trying to work with. So for instance, if I have more pinky side pain, then I might be more routinely putting load through the pinky side of my hand. And this happens often on the right side more than the left in my experience, is that we put a little bit more weight through the outside of the right hand and more on the inside of the left hand when both hands are down. But we can explore that here. So say I want to go away from the pinky side of my hand to get a little bit more extension. I could just load some more weight into that thumb side and see if that helps me go a little farther into extension, or I can do vice versa. I can go into the pinky side and see if that, just by changing the pressure, if I can get deeper into extension. And that often can give you some information, like that might be the problem when you have your hands down or when you're loading your hand onto any surface. If that you're getting certain pain in the wrist, it might just be you have to subtly change where you're putting that pressure. All right, so this would be the second one, just using the wrist wrap there. You should get quite a bit more range of motion if you have this wrapped well before the onset of any pain. And in some cases, if you get this right and the symptoms aren't too bad to begin with, you might actually be able to eliminate the pain and go through a full range of motion and then once you take it off, some of that will stick around for a while. All right, and then the third piece would be keep the wrist strap on, and then you can add a monster band that's attached to a pole, and this just gives your compression a little bit more direction. So now I get the voodoo band, and then I'm gonna triple wrap, but you can wrap this once, twice, 3 times, as much compression as you can tolerate, and then you're just doing the same thing. You can also add the hands, so now we got all 3 forms of compression working together, moving us in the direction of the restriction, and we should be able to go quite a bit farther here, and then bring it back. The other thing to be mindful of is what's going on with the shoulders here. So the more I'm collapsed here, the more I'm also collapsed in the wrist. So it's going to be a bit different if I'm up and I keep my shoulders protracted. It's like I'm moving myself away from the ground, so I have a little bit more support. I might be able to go farther before the onset of pain because there's actually less compression into the ground. So hopefully that makes sense. If you have any questions, go to movementprofessional.com. I'll see you next time.